In this video, we're going to show you a behind-the-scenes look at the event code that makes the menu controls work. The menu controls are the buttons, text boxes, and drop-down menus that operate the various functions for connecting to your micro and scaling the X and Y axis, logging, snapshots, and so forth. In the previous videos, we showed you how to place and size controls like these and also how to enter event codes to make them work. Now we're going to show you a bit more about event codes so that you can begin to get a handle on how the MakerPlot instructions work to affect the parts of the interface, like the plot area. But before we start, we should say that we're using our My interface that we've been working on during this Maker video series. And the menu items on the bottom are based on the standard interface, which is one of the 10 interfaces that come with MakerPlot. And the menu controls on this interface are also pretty consistent across most all of the other MakerPlot interfaces. So what you learn here will help you to understand the same or similar controls on other interfaces. So what is event code? Now, most event code is executed when a button is clicked. This action triggers the MakerPlot code to do something like reset the plot area or turn a meter alarm on and off. We saw this when we programmed our slider switches to turn the meter alarms on or off in the previous Maker videos. And if you haven't viewed these videos as yet, please do, as they will give you a much better idea of what event codes are all about. So to make these things happen, we need to program the controls, as they're called, to react to these conditions. And that's what event codes do. So let's start learning about event codes by first placing our cursor over the Reset Plot button and pressing the Shift key. Now right-click to bring up the Object Editor. It's in the Object Editor where we can view and enter event codes. And as we see here in our event code area, we have a comment that says Reset Plot, and we just have one simple instruction, and that is !RSET. Now what this does is just simply execute the RSET function when we click the button. So let's do it. First of all, let's drop our Object Editor. We'll click Reset Plot, and indeed, it resets our plot area. So the event code here, once again, pushing the Shift key, right-clicking, is nothing more than a simple one-line instruction. Let's come over here to the Y-axis, and let's put our cursor on the Up button. And as we can see, this is another single instruction event code. In this case, it's SFTU, or basically Shift Up. So when we click our Up button, which we'll do now, it simply moves the Y-axis up. And the same occurs when we click the Down button. We move the Y-axis down. So let's push our Shift key and right-click on it, and we can see that our event code is nothing more than a !SFTD, which means Shift Down. Let's come over here to the Double and Have buttons, pushing the Shift key and right-clicking on the double. We see this is again another single instruction event code. So we're going to double the Y-axis by clicking this. For example, right now we're at 500. If we click the double button, we go to 1000. If we click it again, we go to 2000. If we come down here to the equivalent button in the opposite direction, the Have button, click it, we go back to 1000. Clicking again, we're back to 500 again. Looking at its event code, we see that it is nothing more than HLVY, and the one above it for double is DBLY. Double Y and Have Y. Up to now, we've been looking at individual buttons. What I want to show you right now is how these various buttons and sometimes text boxes are interlinked with each other with their event codes. Let's start out here by looking at the Y-axis. In the Y-axis, we see two values, a max at 250 and a min at 0. This is the minimum and maximum y-axis that MakerPlot uses when it loads the interface. And also, let's look over here at the x-axis. There's another max value of 60.00. And once again, this is the maximum time that's used for the interface when it loads. So as you see right now, our interface has been reset to the minimum and maximum y-axis between 0 and 250. And also the time span has been adjusted between 0 and 60 seconds. Now each one of these text boxes, as they're called, has an event code to it. And let's look at that first, because I want to show you very shortly here how another button, and in particular it's the reset axis button, how that reset button actually uses the values in our max and min y-axis and in our max x-axis. So let's look at the y-axis for min. Push my shift key, bring up the object editor, and we see here that the value for the min is 0, just like it is in the box itself. And then we have a event code that says exclamation point SPAN for span, and then paren txt ymin close paren, comma, paren txt ymax close paren, and then a bell command right after that. The idea here for text boxes is to be able to enter a value into them, and when you press the enter key, that value will be reflected in the value here at the box. And the span then for the y-axis will be controlled by the exclamation point SPAN command. So anytime we can enter a new value in either the min or the max, the event code for that particular text box will take over and adjust the min and max for us. Let's go to the max, and we're going to demonstrate that. I'm going to do a shift, right click on the max, bring up the object editor, and here we see it's 250, just like it says in the text box, 250. What I'll do now is I'm going to change this to some other value. I'm going to change this to something like 400. So I'm going to type in 400, enter, and we'll notice immediately that the y-axis went to 0 to 400. Now the reason it did that was because of this event code. And once again, right click on it, bring up the object editor, and again we see that it's 400 now in the value, and the event code that was executed was exclamation point SPAN, txt ymin, and txt ymax. And by the way, let's look at the name of our control here, and that's up here at the top. So the name of our control is txt ymax. Similarly, the name of the other control was txt ymin. So that's where we get our values. So whatever we put in our text boxes, if there is event code there to be able to handle it, it will then take that event code and then do whatever the event code causes it to do. And in this case, it's going to readjust the y-axis between the minimum and maximum values and then ring the bell. Let's take a look at the x maximum, and this in particular is set at 60, and its event code is exclamation point tmax double paren me double close paren. So what does that mean? Me is a special kind of a shortcut command in MakerPlot that says set the time max equal to me, or the value of whatever I am. And the value of this particular box, which is named txt xmax, as we see in the name, the value of it is 60.00. So whatever we key into this particular box, let's change it. We're going to change it now to, let's say, 90. Key in 90, hit the enter key, and now we have 90 in our value box. So every time we enter a value into this particular text box, it's going to change the time frame, and as you'll see, the time frame right now goes from 0 to 90 seconds rather than going from 0 to 60 seconds. All right, I said we are going to show you how to link some of these text boxes to another button, and that in particular is the Reset Access button. So let's come down to the Reset Access button, click on it, and here we see every time we push the Reset Access button, it's going to reset our axis back to what we have in our maximum and minimum y-axis text boxes, and also our x-axis maximum text box. So we have a comment here that says reset y, and that is followed up by the same kind of event code that we saw, which is exclamation point SPAN txt y min, comma txt y max. And then we see we're going to set the time minimum to 0, which is exclamation point TMIN 0, and then we're going to set the maximum to txt x max. So that's how we can control the various switches and text boxes, and that's how they're interlinked. Let me give you an example of this. I'm going to purposely change the y-axis. I'm going to move it up. I'm going to double it. I'm going to change the time frame to 180 seconds instead of 90. Now what we'll do is come in here and click on Reset Axis. Now when we click on Reset Axis, that event code should execute, and our y-axis should go back to 0 to 400, and our x-axis and time should go between 0 and 90 seconds. So let's click on it, see what happens. Indeed it does. Now let's take a look at another example of event code, and this time we're going to get into event code that's a bit more complicated than just a couple of lines of MakerPlot commands. Let's come over to the Snapshot button, and as the text tip says, take an image of the interface. So let's take a look at the event code for the Snapshot button. Okay, we see a comment here that says play sound, and it's a tilde PWAV stapler. So the tilde PWAV is a MakerPlot command to say play wave file, and the wave file in this case is the sound of a stapler. And then we're going to append the date and time to the snapshot, and that's handled by the MakerPlot command exclamation point APDT on. So we're basically going to turn the append date and time on. Then we have a comment that says entire form, not just plot. And then that's followed by exclamation point form on. So we're going to now capture in our snapshot the entire form, meaning not just the plot area, but all the meters and buttons and switches and text boxes and so forth. And then finally, we're going to actually take the snapshot based on the plot name. So we're going to do a snap paren title close paren, and the title is the name of our particular interface. So that's another more complicated event code example. Let's review what we did in our other series, and that is adjusting the meter's y-axis and turning the alarms on and off. Let's come down here to the bottom meter. Let's push the shift key and right-click on the y-axis adjust button, and we see here that our event code is the following: POBJ GAU underscore 53 underscore 54 dot max equal a max. So those are our analog maximum and minimums that relate to the y-axis, which is what we're going to change our meter to. Now, right now, our y-axis is set to 0 to 400. Our meter axis is set to 0 to 250. So I would imagine that if we click the x-axis adjust, our second meter in green would adjust itself to 0 to 400. So let's try that. Let's click on it. Yes, indeed, it went from 0 to 400. And the reason it did that was because of the event code that we put into the particular button. So we have used this button, the y-axis adjust button, to affect the meter above it. And we've affected the meter above it in terms of its scale. Let's look at another event code, and that is our slider switch. And this slider switch is to turn the alarm of our second meter on or off. And this starts with a exclamation POBJ GAU 53_54.alarm. And that's equal to HSW_58. And once again, HSW_58 just happens to be the name of this control, as we see here under the name. So in effect, what we're doing is we're linking this slider switch to the meter above it, and what we're saying is we want to be able to adjust the alarm condition 1 or 0 based on our switch being 1 or 0. That's what this event code does. You'll be able to learn a lot more about MakerPlot's event codes in subsequent videos and also in our MakerPlot documentation, which is quite extensive and will give you a very, very good handle on exactly what to do to create event codes for any sort of buttons, switches, text boxes, and so forth that you may want to create for your own individual interfaces.